I'm sure I could spend an hour talking about credit default swaps. I'm sure I could spend 2 days talking about a lack of transparency. I'm sure I could spend a lot of time explaining what I think is the right thing that we should do to put as much liquidity into the markets as possible. So I will try to be succinct. I came to the United States Senate. I know what it's like to take a tough vote and lose your seat. I also know what it's like to see millions of dollars in the stock market go away and a bubble burst. And I also know what it's like to stand on the Senate floor, as I did 3 years ago, in which someone tried to cram legislation in the defense authorization bill to open up drilling in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, and I said that that is the equivalent to legislative blackmail. I am not going to vote for this legislation tonight based on whether someone crams in tax giveaways and credits that I actually have fought for. I'm going to render my decision based on what I think is important for the American people. And Mr. President, I think that there is something here that is missing in our discussion. I applaud Chairman Dodd, who has worked hard on the Banking Committee. I applaud my colleague who just spoke, who spoke eloquently about the need to do something. But, Mr. President, the problem with the legislation before us is that it is choosing winners and losers. It is inserting the federal government in a role in which they decide, along with the private sector, exactly how funds should be allocated. Now, Mr. President, I am for the full faith and credit of the United States government backing these institutions. What I am not for is turning the keys to the Treasury over to the private sector. Now, there is much we could agree on tonight. We could agree on the new changes to the FDIC rule. We could agree on mark-to-market to bring in better marketing and accountability. We could bring the uptick rule and other predictability measures that would help the market understand that there is a broad commitment by this institution to do something to help stabilize the markets. But, Mr. President, I am very concerned about the pick here, pick there approach that has transpired in the last several weeks. I ask you to just think of one institution in my state, Washington Mutual, who I wouldn't necessarily applaud for its subprime lending rates or for its use and backing of credit default swaps. But I would ask you to consider the fact that as that institution was forced into sale by this government, who were the winners and losers in that? J.P. Morgan got the assets of that institution and benefited from that. In fact, they predicted that night on a conference call that after 1 year and their investment, they would have a $512 million return on that investment, a 27% return in 1 year. Now, the FDIC got some money out of that. And to say nothing about the over 60,000 shareholders that were wiped out with zero. My complaint is, where is J.P. Morgan standing up for the retirement plans, the deferred compensation plans, and other packages that the employees at that company were due? So it's very convenient for us to now choose that we are going to add to J.P. Morgan's bottom line. In fact, if we would instead do what I'm suggesting, have an equity proposal, instead of having TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, as the roof over America, instead an equity program where the United States would leverage our capital and get a 10 to 12% return, our nation would be better funded for the onslaught of trouble that is still going to remain after we pass this legislation. I could not even get my amendment to be considered. So much for the transparency of the United States Senate. Mr. President, I'm going to continue to work for this idea, for equity, for a more leveraged position, and to do the traditional role that government has done time and time again, to use our equity to leverage the private sector to secure our economy. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Madam President.